There we go. So it is 2:50 Europe time, 8:50 here where I'm sitting. Welcome to the session 1 on where are the regulations today. We have a set of house rules. So Juliette, can you bring up that slide? Thank you. So here are the house rules, the red chat box on the right side of the screen. This is where you can present yourself, chat with each other. On the left side, you will see a little box with a question mark in, a little bubble with a question mark in it. This is where you're going to ask the questions to the presenters. And if you want to ask a question to us, please, state the name of who it is you're asking the question to. Otherwise, it will become a general question. Do not touch the buttons in the red box below. Okay. And to exit the session, click on the back to the lobby button at the top right of your screen. The session and the chat are recorded. So if you have a problem with that, then you should leave now, but I guess you don't, since you knew it was going to be recorded. All right, Juliette, thank you very much. So I am Pieter Maes, and I have the pleasure of moderating this session today. In my daily life, I am Director of Research here at National Fire Protection Association in the United States. And you might wonder, why am I from the United States moderating a session on European regulations? Well, I have been very active in Europe for many, many years until I joined NFPA 4 years ago. And I was actually the original chair of the Technical Task Force in Fire Safe Europe. So this is very much a trip down memory lane for me to be part of this event. And I'm joined here by 3 amazing panelists that's going to help, with this discussion. We're not going to have a presentation here. This is going to be all about a conversation about the regulations. And I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. So Martina, why don't you go first?
Yes, thank you, Birgitta. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Martina Manes. I am currently a lecturer in civil engineering at the University of Liverpool. My research and my current research and my PhD were focused on the investigation of fire statistics mainly in the UK, in England, and in the US. And I'm also currently involved in the EU FireStat project, funded by the European Commission to increase the awareness on fire statistics in Europe and mainly in Europe, but also in other countries as well.
Thank you very much, Martina. Peter, why don't you go next?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pieter Maes from Belgium. I'm the founder and program developer of the Firefighter Mayday program. We focus on safety of firefighters at fires, modern fires. And besides that, I'm a frontline firefighter with the Brussels Fire Department for about 20 years of experience now. And I've been working with Fire Safe Europe before to think about issues we come across with modern buildings and fire safety. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. And Guillermo, last but not least.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be here, and hello to everyone. I am Guillermo Rein, Professor of Fire Science here in London at Imperial College. From the accent, you will notice that I'm not British, actually. Our kids are British, but I'm originally from Spain, and I've been in the US, in Scotland, and now in London. My research is devoted about all materials that could burn, and as an engineer to make sure that we have homes and offices and cities that are safer. Over the course of these conversations, I might be referring to some of the things that we have found in the last few years.
Thank you, Guillermo. And I know there's going to be some polls as we are moving through this. There should be a first poll launched, Juliette, the very first question. There we go. So if you can put in your votes on that one, go ahead. So I'm going to start out with a general question to the panel before I dig into each one of them and their specialized knowledge. But as we're talking about the regulations and where are they today, I want to really focus in on, what are the major trends that we've seen this last decade or maybe the last couple of decades here in the building out there that are challenging the work we're trying to do. And who wants to go first? I'm going to let you go ahead, Guillermo.
Thank you. Can I just say that the question that we just answered, actually also the panel members, we were asked to answer. I thought it was really nice. I just want to tell you my answer. My answer is no. Regulations are not sufficient, are not ready. Mostly because regulations nationally all around the world are actually supposed to provide the minimum level of safety. there is plenty of space from the minimum to the maximum that engineers can provide. So yes, regulations are not sufficient and cannot be sufficient. And there is a lot of things that can be done that go well beyond regulations. But regarding the question, the specific question that you asked, Birgitta, of what are the latest challenges that we are seeing in fire hazards, we see many. The reason is that the way we build homes and offices and buildings is always changing, faster or slower, but it's always changing. It's something really good. It's called innovation. And we have the architects and the engineers and society to be for the reason. And innovation it has to be welcome, but there is an issue with safety and innovation. That if innovation is faster than our understanding of safety of these innovations, then we might be building things that we actually don't know if they are safe or not. And we don't want, definitely not as safety experts, we don't want to discover this too late when the catastrophe or the disaster hits. So there are a few elements that I can think of right now that are concerning. So no specific order. Batteries, lithium-ion batteries are absolutely everywhere. I am speaking to you, and there is one there, and there is another one here, and there is another one to the left. And I came in a car that has another one, and sometimes there are homes that already have them inside. They are everywhere. They're amazing. I love them. Great innovation. Massive issues about their safety and fire and toxicity, and how do we suppress them, and how do we make sure that actually people are safe in all cases. So that's one case where innovation has gone way faster than our understanding of safety. Another one is timber. Making buildings out of wood has been one of the most ancient technologies of humanity. So we've been building timber for a really, really long time. But now there is this new idea that timber is carbon negative, or at least carbon neutral. So it could be replaced concrete and steel and make cities are much more sustainable, beautiful, and carbon negative. The issue is that we don't understand actually how really timber behaves in fire. We don't. It's shocking. I'm embarrassed as a member of this community, but we don't. We know that it burns, but we just don't know how. We don't know what is truly the controlling factors, which means that the solutions to the problem exist, but we are not really sure yet how good they are. They might not be good enough, and we don't want to discover this when it's too late. So another one is facades. Obviously, I'm in London. The disaster of the Grenfell Tower and many other fires are happening around the world. There was recently one in Milan, and the week before there was one with a lot of casualties in China. It is horrific. It is one case where innovation has gone decades ahead of our understanding of the safety, and we discover the bad way. We discover when the catastrophe hits, and now my office is full of questions of, is this facade safe? And I don't know. But not because I don't know enough, it's because humanity as a whole doesn't know enough about not buildings that have been proposed to be built, but buildings that were built decades ago. So facade fires is one of the cases where innovation was way faster than safety. And the last one that I want to mention is wildfires. Typically, engineers that are in buildings are not asked to be involved in wildfires because that happens in the forest far away. But what is happening right now is that many towns around the world, rural areas, are actually well in contact with the forest, with the wilderness. And these fires are so large that like literally overrunning the towns, they are destroying the towns. This is happening in California, it's happening in Australia, it's happening in the Mediterranean where I am from. And that means that there is a need to understand what's driving these fires. And obviously that's not only ecology and atmospheric science, it also calls for fire scientists who has been studying flames for a very long time. And this is where there is a lot of space for engineers to help in protecting against wildfires. And as climate change is bringing actually more wildfires, then there is going to need more of fire engineers.
Well, then you hit on all the highlights there, Guillermo. So thank you. That was a really good way of kicking us off. So I noticed Peter was putting his hand up, so I know he's dying to make a comment. So get in there, Peter.
Well, Guillermo says that we're building more and more buildings with wood, and that he, as a scientist, does not understand the burning process of wood. That's pretty concerning for a firefighter who is on the front line and who is walking into these buildings. And it's not only wood. We've been asking questions for probably 2 decades about fire behavior and smoke production especially, and the interaction between smoke and fire in modern buildings. And we don't always understand them, but we have no choice than to keep following our mission. So we will change our tactics, we will change our strategies, and we will find solutions to tackle the challenge we have ahead. And we'll still go into those fires, but we don't always understand them. And in the opening session, the speaker mentioned that building systems should be validated on their fire safety when they're installed in the building. And I was having like a thought like, nah, I don't want it when they're installed. I want to know that a system is safe before it's on the building. And I think we need to do more research more earlier in a production process or developing process to understand the fire behavior of a material before we put it into houses. Because people consider a house as fire safe. People have always considered a house a safe place to go to sleep. And I'm concerned. I'm not always sure that what people saying is true. Houses are quite dangerous places when they catch fires these days because it's going so quickly. It's going so quickly to fire. And it wasn't like that 20 years ago. So what has changed? I don't know. And I hope Guillermo will have some answers in the future.
So if I can have Juliet putting up the poll question number 2 is for part of this discussion, because Peter, I have to ask you, and you've almost said it already, but how do you see your job nowadays? Is it more dangerous or less dangerous than it was a decade ago or 2 decades ago with the changes that we've seen in the built environment?
Well, there's some statistics that give a good impression. The amount of fires is going down. We're seeing less fires than we did in the past, but the casualties are going up. The number of casualties per fire is going up. And also on the side of firefighters, the number of injuries and dramatic accidents with firefighters per fire is also going up. So I can only give you one thing, and that's it's getting more dangerous for firefighters to tackle a fire. One of the main reasons is that we have to work blind. Many people think that a fire that is dangerous is a fire where you see flames, the big fires with all the flames coming out. That, sadly enough, is not true. The dangerous fires for firefighters are the silent ones where you see a little of smoke coming out of the building and you have a smoke-filled building, and that smoke is going to do something. And that's our main challenge, our main issue, and our main danger. And also for the people living in the building, is smoke their main issue. If I see flames consume smoke, I feel safe. It's to get to the flames that I have to travel through the smoke that I have a really dangerous job. And just for Juliet, a little remark that the poll is not showing up.
Exactly. Yeah, I've seen some comments out in the chat as well around that. So yeah, you're the person, Peter, that truly has made me aware, how smoke is fuel. So thank you for teaching me that lesson almost 10 years ago. So it's a good lesson to learn. So I want to, as you are answering this question in the poll, I'm curious to see what the answer will be. I want to bring Martina into the discussion, because you come to this with more of looking at the overall data, the fire statistics, and so on. What is it that you are seeing out there? Is there anything that starts showing up in the fire statistics?
So we have, over the last years, we have seen that fire statistics is widely used in several applications, and especially when we think about very complex and structured fire statistics, such as the one in England, in the UK or in the US, there are several variables available related to pre- and post-fire conditions. For example, if we think about the pre-fire conditions, there are variables related to item, material first ignited, source of ignition, or area fire origin. And then for the consequences, then of course the evaluation of the fire spread, the area damaged, and then the direct financial losses. So there are several variables in the fire statistics that could provide the fire safety community an indication of the trends, especially when we plot the trends over specific times, for example, over 10 or 20 years. At the same time, there is usually in the last years a very small fluctuation in the variables, and this of course can lead to an assumed fire risk. So the fire safety community and the communities in general, or the authority, trying to assume a certain risks, and then at the same time there are major fire incident. We are withstanding major fire incident. At the same time, there is also a very important aspect, which is the investigation of small fires. So in the fire statistics, we are seeing that the majority of the fire recorded are mainly small fires, which needs to be addressed, because addressing an evaluated small fire, we can identify common factors, specific fire characteristics that can be found in several property types. And so there is always a tension between increasing the variables needed by the fire safety community for design, fire prevention, fire optimization, and then of course guarantee that the data are reliable, so ensure that there is data quality. I think that these are the main trends that we are seeing. So we are seeing that usually we have a general decrease in the numbers of fires, but then what we have seen even in investigating various fire statistics in Europe is that usually the variables collected, if we not consider the very complex fire statistics, then the variables collected are generally focused on fire incident and numbers of fatalities. So there is another part related to fire safety measures that could be improved.
I think you're bringing up a really interesting point around how we as we do tend to focus on the big incidents, and those are the ones that truly change regulations over time. There's a lot we can learn from the smaller fires. We heard in the opening speech that there's 11 fire deaths in Europe every day. That means that it takes a week, and we have more fire deaths across Europe than there was in one Grenfell fire. Yet we don't get upset every week about these people have died in fires. So there's truly a lot we can learn from looking into each of the incidents to see what are the things that are happening, how can we do better in our fire prevention. I want to bring back to the piece, which is we had the poll. It got to work, Juliette. So you can chill, and it was quite interesting to see the answers. I hope you saw them too, Peter, because we saw that most people answered both, and we had a very low number on flame retardants and a couple on the smoke retardants. Do you want to give a comment to that, since you already told us, smoke is fuel, smoke is your biggest enemy? What do you think?
Well, it's a hope-giving statistic, or poll, I would say. Most people wanted a smoke and flame retardant, and that's good. That's okay. The problem is we only have flame retardants. We have no smoke retardants, and I've been pressing the question to the industry: when are you going to make a smoke retardant? Because if we have less smoke, we have more visibility to tackle a fire as firefighters, and fires travels through smoke. So if you have no smoke, the fire is not going to travel as fast in a building. But also if you have less smoke, the survivability of people living in a building is going to go up a lot. Most people in the Grenfell fire died of smoke intoxication, not of a flame or heat. So our biggest concern is smoke and not flames. So I'm happy with the poll, and I hope the industry is going to follow. That would make our job a lot easier and a lot safer.
Thank you, Peter. And we got a good little comment out in the chat here from Professor Galea that said, making the point that most of fire deaths are in domestic dwellings, not in major Grenfell type incidents, which is true. That was exactly my point. And we have been pretty good at avoiding these major catastrophes until we saw Grenfell happening. And then I want to go back to some of the points that you made, Guillermo, around that, the kind of research that we need in order to better understand some of these modern methods of construction, some of these challenges that we're seeing today. Do you feel that there's enough of an understanding, enough of even, is there enough money on the table for you in the research community to truly be able to look into some of these issues, or are you struggling to get funding to try and get the answers that you need?
That was to me, Birgit?
No, that was to Guillermo. Sorry if I said wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, no, fire science has historically been very poorly funded. Actually, it was not a field of science until the Second World War, when the powers that be wanted to use what they have learned about burning each other's cities. They wanted to turn it into protecting the cities of the others. That's the beginning of fire science. And since then, unfortunately, what happens is that we see this oscillatory process. I call it cyclic. After Grenfell, a lot of people were asking questions, and a lot of people were attending our seminars, and a lot of people had a marginally larger belief in the research that we were doing. But as a catastrophe passes by and people start to forget, we go back to the situation where they say, you're a fire engineer? What is that? Right? So I happen, just to tell you something, our kids are growing up in London, so they go to the school in London. London is a fantastic place to tell kids what you do for a living. I'm a fire engineer, because every kid in London is taught the 1666. That was a long time ago. 1666 Great Fire of London. Every kid in London knows this. Maybe not their parents, because maybe they're not coming from London. So when the kids ask me, what does his papa do? It's like, oh, he's a fire engineer. I said, of course, he's trying to avoid the Great Fire of London. They understand. But my colleagues here in Imperial College, great minds of fluid mechanics and medicine, and they say, sorry, Guillermo, tell me again, what is it that you do? Yeah, so we are a very small field, which is absolutely fine. That's not a surprise of anyone. We have a big duty, developing the science that would allow the engineers and the authorities, and the authorities involves the firefighters, to provide safety to life and to property and to the environment is a big, big deal of a job. So we are very happy, the few of us that are around the world doing this. We're about 1,000 of us doing the science for this. But it goes with cyclics. So right now we are in a downward trend, so to speak. Hopefully we will not reach bottom where it's very difficult to continue the science. Actually, some of our field, some of the people in our field had to change field. Some of the great scientists of fire engineering had to go to other disciplines, because they, as academics, they did not have a career in the topic. I'm very happy I can tell you there is absolutely no danger for me, I think, leaving the field. But when I meet other people around the world, they say, no, I just stopped doing fire science because it's much easier to get money on nanotechnology or in climate change, or an academic always have to have, like any person, like everybody, they need a job. And obviously they use their beautiful minds for whatever is possible.
That is just, it's only been 4.5 years since Grenfell. And you're already telling me that sitting in London, you're on a downward trend. That is scary. I knew it was bad, but it's even worse than I thought.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's Brexit and it's the pandemic, and the government in London has to pay a lot of recladding. So,
wow, but still, I mean, does this, it's unfortunately a trend we see around the world. Though some of the things that you've been hitting on in the discussion here around, that we are doing the facades because of climate change. Climate change also impacts the wildfire risk, etc. There's a lot of money in that kind of research at the moment. Are we not good enough as a community, as a fire community, to make the point that we need to be taken into account as we are looking at these major societal issues? Are we not good enough at that? And I can see Pieter is flagging to answer that one. Go ahead, Pieter.
I think we're good enough. I think within the scientific community and also on the side of firefighters, we are good enough to see the challenges and to understand what we should look at to solve problems. I think the problem is that systems have been installed based on the assumption that they were fire safe and non-flammable. So we now have a society with some concerns in buildings, and Grenfell is just one example, but we've had a fire in April that was dramatic and very, very challenging. And the issue is that the problems we're installing now are not going to play a role tomorrow. It's going to take years. The buildings where we see problematic fires very often are older buildings with older technical installations, and fires start off in technical installations. And as long as they don't find extra fuel, that's no problem. But if the building has construction materials or just furniture or other things nearby that provide the fuel for the fire to develop, that's when we get the issue. And I see schools, hospitals, elderly homes being built with systems that are very concerning for me. And I know that it's not going to be tomorrow that we have the issue. It's going to take years until there's a problem lack to the technical installation that starts to have defaults, and that's when we have the issues. And I've seen some questions thinking about smoke retardant or smoke suppressant. If it's smoke retardant, we're going to have less fire, absolutely less fire. So that'd be really good. Somebody mentioned that less visibility is a problem. Absolutely true. The age of people that die in a fire is going up big time because our society is getting older at a really quick pace. And those folks are not as fast as the young 20-year-old guy that can sprint out of a house. So combine that with lack of visibility because of very, very quick smoke buildup, people get trapped really easy. So I think we need to focus on that. And as firefighters, we need to understand how we can compartmentalize buildings on a fire to make safe areas to get people out. Grenfell was an example of that. If we could have stopped smoke getting all over the building, but kind of create barriers for the smoke on the intervention, that would have made a big difference to get people out safely.
So I wanted to pick on the point that you were saying about most buildings already built. It's true. I mean, we have about a 2% new built rate or less in Europe as well as in the United States. So even if we update regulations, and so it takes a long time before they actually have an impact. And also when we see new systems being put in that are bad related to fire, it takes a while before we have the critical mass and then we see the incident happen. And that's when we then are in the situation that we are after Grenfell. It's like, oh my God, this is on many buildings and we need to do something about it in retrospect. And that's why I want to go into a little bit about fire statistics on this. So Juliette, if you can throw in poll question number 3, because as we're looking at this, could we and shouldn't we learn more from the fires that we're seeing, even if they're not those big catastrophic events, and even if it's just people in 1 or 2 dying in a dwelling fire, but also those that do not have any fatalities, but could start showing us that something is happening. Martina, how do you see, are we good enough at using fire statistics in our decision making and even in our engineering decisions?
Yes, so I think that nowadays what we are facing is that really based on the country in which we work or we live. So, for example, in the UK, fire statistics is widely applied, and also, for example, based on the work that I developed when I worked in Edinburgh, there was also an investigation of fire statistics to update British standard, in particular the British standard PD 79747 of 2003. For the people who are not familiar with the standard, is a standard related to probabilistic risk assessment, and it had data from 1966 to 1987 about building fires. So when we investigated the fire statistics from England and the US, we realized that those data were not representative in some cases of real scenarios. So one application of fire statistics nowadays is, of course, to support changing regulations. At the same time, what can be done with the application and the analysis of fire statistics is also to understand if the implementation of particular guidelines can have an impact on the reduction of numbers of fires or numbers of fatalities and casualties. This was also developed in a work published by the Home Office, tracking, for example, the evaluation of the numbers of fires over 15 years. And they have seen that the implementation of, for example, regulation related to furniture or smoke alarms or building regulations created downward trends in the numbers of fires. Of course, it is really important to track the evaluation of fire statistics and the specific variables over time. Another application is also to understand the application and the operation of the effectiveness of fire safety measures. As Peter was saying before, I think that it's really important to understand the effectiveness of alarms and automatic extinguishing systems. And if we consider some statistics in England or in the US, there are some specific fields related to these. For example, the operation, the effectiveness of alarms and automatic extinguishing systems, and also the reason for the failure in their effectiveness. So the applications of fire statistics is increasing in the last years, and I'm expecting an increasing trend even in the future. At the same time, I think that fire statistics can also disprove some conception. So, for example, we were expecting, at least in England, we were expecting an increasing numbers of fire incidents during the lockdown. And then the fire statistics proved that there was a very small fluctuation in that particular period of time. So I'm believing that fire statistics will be used even more in the future and can be a very powerful tool of analysis. Of course, there are some uncertainties and related to the statistical variables of the statistical nature of the variables, but it's still a representation of the fire scenarios that we are facing now in our cities.
So it's interesting to look at the poll results as there's trickling in. So I can see there's a general agreement among our audience that authorities should oversee collecting fire statistics, with a few pointing to the fire brigade and investigators and one for the insurance. So I think we have a general understanding that the responsibility and who should actually collect the overall data or bring together the overall data should lie with authorities. But I think we also all understand that the ultimate data, when they're collected, is collected on the scene by the firefighters. And hopefully later on being followed up if there's been further investigation into the fire. Peter, do you have any thoughts around this being on the ground and first having to be in the situation that you put out the fire, and then afterwards you also have to pick up the data, fill in the forms?
Yeah, two things. First of all, firefighters are most of all people that like close contact jobs. I do a job and I learn skills and tactics to go in there and literally be up close and personal with the fire and do with my hands what I've been trained to do. I'm not the type of person that likes to sit at a desk and fill out paperwork for statistics. So that's an issue, but I do believe in numbers and statistics. They are important, and research, we need them. The other thing with statistics is one of the reasons why Grenfell was such a difficult fire to tackle, and many other fires, the ones we had in April too, is because if you look at statistics, it's almost impossible that it's going to happen. And since the numbers didn't show you the possibility that was going to happen, fire departments didn't train for it. So I think that, yes, authorities need to gather the information, but there's something important in the field, the experience of firefighters, that should echo back to the statistics and to the researchers. I think we have a lot of questions that could have been answered earlier if we had what I'd like to call a holistic approach to fire safety. And I talked a lot about that with Guillermo. And I think if science and firefighters get together, we can learn a lot faster. We should have understood earlier that smoke is fuel. We should have learned earlier that if we go into a burning building today, we need to close the door behind us, being firefighters, and we close ourselves up in the building to make sure that there's no air or oxygen going towards the fire, Because if that happens, the smoke above us and around us where we're traveling and crawling in, that's going to inflame completely. That's the flashover we have. Those things we only learned the last 10, 15 years, and we're still training firefighters to understand those fire behaviors to be safer. But we have other questions that we want to ask and that we want to work on. So statistics, yes, but getting the field experience of firefighters and get an interaction between firefighters and science to work on it.
I couldn't agree more. It's really important to get that.
I agree too.
Yeah, go ahead, Martina.
No, sorry. Yeah, I agree too. So I think that it's really important to combine the two aspects. And even when you were talking about that we didn't know about, for example, we couldn't predict the Grenfell Tower. We have seen that, especially in England, there was an increasing trend in fire incident related to claddings after Grenfell. So I think that working and collaborating with firefighters and fire brigade is extremely important, also in the way that how the fire incidents are collected. And then also in fire statistics, there are several fields now that are increasing over time. So there are new fields. In the UK, there is now a particular field related to building types. So nowadays, we will be able to now address if the fire in that particular building was involving cladding, for example. So I guess that I totally agree. And I think that this is something that we could work together in the future.
So Guillermo, I would like to bring you into this discussion as well, because I mean, you are educating the next generation of fire safety engineers that are going to work on all this. And we just discussed also the challenge of you to get the funding to do the research that's needed and so on. How do you see the role of the fire statistics in all of this? And is there something that we need to change?
Yeah, fire statistics have a very, very important role. They're not unique. They're unique. They're not sufficient by themselves. It's actually very important what Peter has said, that statistics shows that any one single fire to any single person is a rare, unlikely event. But yet, for example, in the city of London, every day there are dozens of fires, but it has never happened to me. So it is important to cover the statistics, which, by the way, traditionally in fire safety engineering, until Martina with her research came, is not something that was mentioned. You can go through all the years of professional development as an engineer in fire safety engineering and not have one single academic tell you about fire statistics. But this is changing, and I think the work of Martina actually is helping to change. Even my group, as we speak, we are actually now engaging into look into the statistics, which requires unrusting the statistic knowledge and things like this. But it is very important, but not sufficient. We have to go well beyond the statistics. The statistics tell you what is happening right now in the city or in the town or in the country. We are more concerned as engineers of what could happen in the future when all the forces of innovation and the building industry form the buildings in a particular way. I wanted to say that this is actually how I met Peter. I met Peter several years ago. I don't know when it was now, 2017 maybe, when something unique happened, something that I'm really, really happy that it happened, and really sad that it didn't happen again. And is that we got everyone in the same room representing an attention to fire safety. We had industry, all industries. We had firefighters, we have authorities, we had regulators, we have governments, we had academics, we had absolutely everyone in the same room with one. There is no fight. No, it's not that we met in the room to debate. It was actually to say, how are we going to convince the European Union bodies that they need to help fire safety of their citizens? It was amazing. I really enjoyed it. Peter was one of the speakers. I was tantalized by the things he was saying. Since then, we've met several other times. But this meeting where everybody was together for the first time so far is the last time. It hasn't happened. We remain a very fragmented community, where we might say the same words, but when we actually sit down, unfortunately, we are not rowing in the same direction. And that's actually our loss as a community, that we are not very large, we're small, and we are not punching together. We are actually punching all around.
I think that's an interesting question that came out in the chat. Somebody asked, well, what are the answers the academics want from the firefighters?
Let me give it's not really an answer, but it gives an insight in the lack of knowledge you have from each other. Somebody also mentions that if you close the door behind you going to fight a fire, then you need water points, pipes inside to connect to. That's not what we do. In high-rise, yes, but 99% of the fires will go in with a hose line, and somebody behind us is going to close the door as close as possible around that hose line. So if we leave the door open, and this is something we know thanks to research from the UL Institute in the United States, if you leave the door open and there's a fully developed fire, a little bit underventilated, it will give you 3 to 5 minutes before you have a flashover. Flashover for firefighters gives you 8 to 10 seconds to get out and survive. It's a non-survivable condition, 3 to 5 minutes. If a colleague of mine behind me closes that door and controls the ventilation and limits ventilation to 10 centimeters, we get 20 to 30 minutes in the same situation because we get less oxygen to the fire. Those are the small things that we do. And it's funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting to get the question in the chat. So what answers would I like to hear is, I like to understand the behavior and the interaction between smoke production and fire spread, because we all know fire is spreading with smoke more than with material, and I still haven't met the person that could tell me, yes, we know what smoke production does to fire spread and how that is interacted. We can recognize when smoke becomes flammable, when smoke starts to ignite. We recognize that moment, and that's when we start to pull back. But what is happening behind that, and why is it happening? I think if we understand that properly, we can start to take measures together with the industry and the science community to make buildings a lot safer before firefighters have to come there.
I think that's interesting, because there's when I started in fire, which is too many years ago that I want to tell, but we were very focused on flammability. It was all about ignition and flame spread. That was truly where the focus was, and which was needed at that point in time. But what you're telling is, start thinking about the smoke more. That's what you guys want us to do. It's not only the flammability, it's also the smoke production.
And the interaction between smoke and the spread of fire, because that's how fire travels. It can jump rooms, it can jump floors through smoke. So that's what we want to understand better. That's what we want to learn about.
Guillermo, you had a comment.
Yeah, so the question was, which answers academics want from the firefighters? What we want from the firefighters, and Pieter and all his colleagues, is actually not the answers, it's questions. They need to tell, ideal work to work together is they pose the questions that are worrying them, and then we go and we try to answer them the best that we can. And then we create a conversation, and we say, well, Pieter, I got this answer. And he's like, that's not good enough, Guillermo. So, okay, I'll come back with another better one. So the conversation, which is happening, but it needs to happen at a much larger magnitude. The best way is academics can try to answer questions, and people who are faced with the hazard and they are busy in their job of facing the hazard as firefighters, they can pose the questions and let others try to answer.
And it can be really practical. For example, it turns out smoke particles are jamming our radio signals. So somebody in science should find out a way that we can keep communicating, also if it gets really thick smoke, because the particles block our radio signals. Simple things like that.
Can even be the way we build. The way the buildings are made, that can block signals as well. So that's another challenge. There was an interesting comment out in the chat as well. I sort of want to bring in, because I think it's an important one. As we were talking about the fire statistics earlier, we were very much talking about what we're learning in each country. But as it was very correctly brought up in the chat, we should have known that Grenfell could happen because of all the fires that had already happened around the world with fires running up the claddings. Why are we not good enough at learning from each other across borders? Why is it that we don't care about a fire that happens in another country because, we have our own regulations, it's not a problem here? How can we help learning better across borders? I'm going to leave it open to whoever one of you that want to jump in first. Okay, Guillermo.
Thank you. Now, this is a very important question, Birgitta. I'll tell you why the question is very important and why I think academics have to do more about this. First one is the laws of physics are the same everywhere in the planet, as far as we know, and that's pretty much quite certain. And the way we build, especially modern buildings, is extremely similar all around the planet. And we use the same materials. And when an architect comes out with a new idea, it's actually copied quite quickly by the others. And when an engineer comes out with a new system, it's copied quite quickly by the others. So why do we have different regulations? That is literally because authorities and citizens are accepting different levels of safety. So if you go to different countries of the European Union, the same laws of physics, the same materials, different regulations, that means some authorities are accepting higher or lower levels of safety for the citizens. Are these governments telling the citizens? Probably not. And if someone is telling the citizens, I bet it's only the ones who can claim a higher level of safety, and the other ones are not saying much. So there is a lot to do in learning from each other, in particular the successful cases. These are the ones that we can borrow more positive lessons. We can also borrow lessons, negative lessons from the countries that are not doing too well. And then what we do is we try to avoid those cases. And in science, I'm an engineer and scientist. In science, we believe in the universality of knowledge. So the knowledge that we create is not just knowledge for the City of London, it's knowledge for the planet Earth. So that's why for us it's particularly important not to be hindered or stopped by country borders and to reach out more to each other.
Martina, go ahead.
Yes, so I also wanted to mention in this discussion that not having border and sharing knowledge is extremely important. I agree. It is in this light that there is a project funded by the EU Commission in Europe trying to create an awareness on current practice in fire statistics, at least in the European countries, trying to understand the data available, but also the methodology adopted, as well as the terminology, because sometimes in some countries, for example, the same nomenclature in various countries, the same nomenclature can be used, but actually the variable can be referred to different fields. So I think that it is in this light that the ideal aim would be to move towards an harmonized fire statistics, at least fire collection methodology and terminology amongst countries. And some work has been developed in this direction during this EU FireSat project.
I think that's it's a good beginning. It's a good initiative that I being part of it as well from our side. I'm really happy to see that the EU has been doing that. But I think we even have to look wider than just within Europe. We should look all around the world. As Guillermo said, physics are the same and fire is the same. Yes, the way we build might be a little bit different, but it doesn't change things that much. So it really is important that we start looking outside our own little sphere. Been some interesting comments in the chat around this. One of them is that arrogance is one of the reasons we don't learn from others. Well, I guess there's some truth to that. Peter, you got a comment?
Yeah, on arrogance and learning from others. Looking at our organization and culture, and specifically Belgium, I know it's not the same everywhere, but we are suffering from a blame and shame culture within the fire department. Meaning that the more I would share about a problem I had on a fire or the issues I had, and maybe even mistakes I made, the more I'm vulnerable to consequences from insurance companies. Oh, so your extinguishing method wasn't ideal. Oh, that caused more damage and that will come back to me. That's the reality in Belgium. And that makes it we are really closed community and we're not sharing the way we should share. And I think statistics can help a lot in that also to give us insights. But the challenge for statistics is get statistics from the firefighters, get them to talk and give them a safe environment. I know Holland is doing a lot better job on that, but just look at the Grenfell inquiry. It's horrific for the firefighters, what they are suffering there in the inquiry, and they've done all they could. And I know it's the same in many, many places. Give us a safe environment to talk about our experience and share even our mistakes so that we can learn from each other. And for me personally, that I can learn from the accident from colleagues and I don't have to suffer the same accident again tomorrow. And that is something that culture-wise we should change, and also an arrogance that we have to leave behind us. It's not because we're firefighters that we shouldn't look in the mirror and learn from ourselves.
Go ahead, Guillermo.
Yeah, it is important in this concept of sharing and talking to each other. I want to call attention to something that we all have seen. I don't know how much we have discussed it. Is Grenfell has been mentioned today quite often, and it's mentioned a lot in our world. And I travel around and family members and professionals ask me about Grenfell. But Grenfell was not the first, not the last fire tragedy involving a very flammable facade. Just 2 years before Grenfell, there was a fire as big in images and as big in number of fatalities in Shanghai, the biggest city in the world. It doesn't even have a name. I actually don't remember very well the year, and I'm not actually, it is in Shanghai, but I was actually not sure it was in Shanghai. We don't have a name for it. I cannot refer.
2011 Shanghai.
It was 2011. 2011, it was, because I thought it was much closer to Grenfell in 2017. But anyway, so just to let you know that this is not the only fire tragedy. How much do you know about that fire? How not we as an individual person, as a community? How much are we learning from that fire? How is that inquiry going? It's not just the cultural, it's not just the language barrier that they will be writing these things in Mandarin. It is actually that they will not be sharing what is happening in China. It will not be shared openly. They might be talking to scientists. Actually, chances are very high they are talking to scientists, but they are not doing it in the way we are doing it, and they're not sharing the lessons the way we are. I am from Spain. Madrid had a facade fire. I think no one was injured 30 years ago. And for me, it's almost impossible, and I speak the language, and the cultural barrier is non-existent. It's impossible for me to get a report on this fire, or a report that actually more than a description of the smoke came out of a window. So we are learning about Grenfell, and everybody is very impactful for the gravity of Grenfell. But we are, in a way, this is controversial. Humanity is lucky that it happened in the UK, where freedom of press and the determination to learn from mistakes is part of the fabric of the country. If this happens in a country where there is no freedom of press and there is no determination to learn from previous failings, then the rest of the world doesn't get to learn from these things.
I think that's a very good point. A quick comment, Peter, then we have to go into the questions because we got 8 minutes left.
All right, I'm gonna pass it on because it was a comment on something in the chat. Keep going, Birgit.
All right, because we had a few questions in the Q&A, and there's also stuff running in the chat, etc. So one question we had was related to the information should be in digital building logbook, etc. about the building products, which has to contain all the information about the building, including all the changes. This has to be accessible through registration or professional rights. I think it personally is more aiming at information about the building as it's designed, and then how we can learn from it through statistics, maybe through BIM. Does anyone want to comment around this? It's a tough question. I would happily say that I think it would help. It would help us that are later on analyzing the fire statistics, if at the same time as we're looking at some of this specific events, we can go back and we can combine it with detailed information about how the buildings were built. That's often what we're sitting lacking as we're looking at the overall statistics. We cannot go in and look at, well, there were so many buildings with this type of facade system, or so many buildings with this type of insulation, etc. The statistics do not go into that level. If it was combined with information that you can find in BIM, maybe we could get there. That would be great. Yes, Peter. Well,
I'm quickly gonna come back to Guillermo, who mentioned that funding was an issue for the research domain of fire engineering. In Belgium, we have zones, organizations are not even capable to report all the fires on a year base in a statistic correct way, and that's also funding. We need funding in the back office also. If you want to get good statistics from firefighters on what caused the fire and what burned and what was the behavior, then you need to give money to let us do that research, and that's something that's totally lacking. And I'm talking about Belgium, but if you go south in Europe, it's even worse.
I agree. It's a good point, Peter. Thank you. We got a question here as well from Paulo Ramos. When can we expect to have a European fire safety code to be broadly applied? Should it be a performance-based design code rather than a prescriptive code? Does anyone want to try and answer that one? Guillermo, come on.
Yeah, of course. As an engineer, true engineering is performance-based, because it means that the safety of the building is not assumed, but actually has to be demonstrated through the tools that an engineer has. So performance-based is obviously the future. Now, is every single country and every single professional society ready for performance-based? Well, in fire engineering, maybe not yet, but the clear sign of success is when more countries are moving towards performance-based. Prescription-based, which, by the way, is fascinating that a lot of the science comes from the United States on fire, but actually the United States as a country is a little bit prehistoric in the way they do safety. Is still prescription, and for many years it will remain prescription. And that's interesting how the break between science and engineers in the United States is more acute. Their science is developed, their engineering in fire safety is not. In performance-based, don't get me wrong. Whereas in other countries like in Northern Europe or in the UK, there is a much more combination of the two, where actually engineers are reading research on a daily basis, which is quite, obviously for me, it is quite the future, is when engineers are ready to start applying the new knowledge that has been discovered recently. And that is performance-based.
It's interesting, you know, I've worked in mostly in Europe until 4 years ago when I changed to NFPA. And yes, it was a bit of a shock to me to see how things were much more prescriptive over here compared to Europe. There's so much good science going on here, but yeah, it was a bit shocking to me to see how it's not really getting into the codes. Peter, you had a comment on this.
Yeah, just to add to Guillermo's observation, the difference between the US and Europe. On a firefighter's level, on a ventilation strategy, do you close a fire to slow it down, or do you open it up to make it safer? We are opposite still today. In the US, very often the tactic is we have a building with smoke, we take out all the windows, get the smoke and heat away, and things will get better. We do the opposite. And there are two big continents aiming for the same goal. That's kind of hallucinative to understand. It's the same with water. We use open beams, we disperse small droplets to get maximum efficiency from water, and we believe that works. And we also think science is behind us. In the US, they work with full beams, no droplets, and they think they are using the best method. And we're both trying to do the same thing. So it's a really strange observation to see how different we are in the world, and we are aiming for the same safety.
So we are getting to the end, and we have 2 minutes left. And as you see on your screen, the last poll is up for you to vote on. Which of the following hazards needs most attention for fire safety? And it's really interesting to see the results as they're coming in. I hope you're all following them right now. There seems to be a neck and neck between lithium-ion batteries and facades, with tall timber buildings and forest fires further a little bit lower in the response rate. So all the areas that you are hitting on in your first comments, Guillermo, and it looks like that everybody sees that there's a need for working on these, a little bit of a difference, whether it's the lithium-ion batteries or the facades. I think we've been around quite a bit in our discussion here today. There's one last question, if anybody may want Martina today. Somebody says, should we look at the fire load in design based on the discussions that we've had today? Martina, you have a minute.
Yeah, so I think that fire load is quite important, and even in the design, when we talk about fire load, unfortunately, this field is not collected in the fire statistics, so there is no information about fuel load at all in the statistics, and I think that this is something that could be improved in the future. It is difficult to assess, but I think that maybe trying to, what we were saying before, trying to create a dialogue between different parts, then could create probably an improvement even in the recording of this variable.
Thank you, Martina. And with that, we have about 30 seconds left. I want to thank our fabulous panelists. It's been very fun moderating. You've been behaving very nicely. It's been very easy for me, so thank you. I also want to thank the attendants. It's been really lively what's been going on in the chat and also in the Q&A. So it's been a pleasure sitting here watching everything going on while trying to keep on track with the panelists as well. Thank you very much to FireSafe Europe for putting this together and giving us this opportunity to talk about this very important issue. And with that, I wish you a wonderful rest of the day.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you very much.